I graduated high school in June of 42, and in March of 43, I was in the Army. What happened was I it's called a voluntary induction. In other words, you get the letter and you sit back until they call you. Well, I didn't wait for that. I said, I got to go anyway, so I went early. And my first connection with the Army was in Camp Davis in Illinois. And very soon after that, we took a railroad trip down to outside of Wilmington, North Carolina. It was called Fort Fisher, was the base where we were going to take our basic training. It was apparently just barracks built there because it was wasteland, it was swamp, it was very, very uncultivated. But it was ideal for what they were using it for because they had sand areas, acres and acres of it there. Well, the basic training was very, very basic and very, let's say, extremely hard work. The training consisted of getting you in physical shape, a lot of marching, hikes, and carrying your pack and so forth. But primarily, it was to learn how to get your gun ready for whatever it had. Generally, we were used during combat to guard other units, like an airport, an artillery outfit. That was our primary obligation. Well, what happened? A gun crew consisted of about 13 or 14 people, and that was your family from that time on. You everything that had to do with the gun, each person had a responsibility of what they had to do. Mostly it was loading and unloading the truck, so it would be automatic. It could happen in the middle of the night. It could happen any time at all. You had to load this whole thing on a truck. Everything the gun crew owned and everything was put on, we call it a 6x6. And so hour after hour was loading, unloading, getting the gun ready, doing it. The Army is like anything else. They have to brainwash you. You have to react. You can't think about it. When you're ready to do it, you do it automatically because you've done it so often. When we crossed the ocean, it took 15 days. I lost 15 pounds. I was sick as a dog. And when we got there, you had to carry everything you owned. We docked in Cardiff, Wales, pitch black, absolutely black. And to get off the ship, and had to carry whatever we owned, we had to carry. And it was so dark that you had to put your hand on the shoulder of the guy in front of you because he was being led to whatever. And we went into these barracks, very, very basic. The bunks were just strap iron made into a grid, no mattress or anything. You were just supposed to lay on that. Well, fortunately, we were there just a very short time. And from there, our first assignment was to guard an airport outside of Liverpool. And the training continued, but we were now actually doing our job. Our job was, if there was an enemy aircraft, we were supposed to try to shoot it down. And much of the training involved identifying our planes so we could compare which was an enemy and which was ours. So you didn't shoot down our own airplane. There was a lot of that training. And we had to learn how to take the gun apart, put it back together, all of this in pitch darkness. And from there, we got to go out and a little entertainment, to go to dances in Liverpool. If you knew how to jitterbug, you had any girl in England. Well, I wasn't that proficient, but I managed. From that point on, everything was then getting closer and closer to the invasion. Of course, we didn't know when it was going to happen or anything else. And eventually, when the day came along, well, we were just ready. They'd just load our truck and tell us where to go. We would follow that. And as I explained earlier, we were on, I always have trouble in trying to remember how I got off of the ship. I think it was, they had rope nets over the side, and we would climb over and onto a smaller vessel because we had to have our truck and our gun. Well, because of that situation, we were spared the job of rushing onto the beach. We were on the water on D-Day, but by the time, it was another incident that happened. They put us down in the hold of the ship and closed it. I said, "You're not allowed on the deck at all because you interfere with what's going on the deck." Well, we're down there a very short while. It was darkness already, and we heard this huge bang. We were positive that our ship had just been hit. Well, I was the first guy out of there. I got out of the bottom of the ship before they can close it down on. And I spent the rest of the night under a davit. That's the equipment they use for loading and unloading on a ship. And I just sat in there for the rest of the night. And I was on what was happening pre-invasion. I saw all the fireworks. Well, just watching the fireworks was going on there, the bombing and that's another thing. People never realized when they had a bombing run, Elliot will tell you about that, sometimes 100, 150 planes at a time. We watched them at one time, Dusseldorf, Germany. We were on one side of the river, and they were dumping I said, I don't know how anything could have stayed alive. Just bomb after bomb after bomb. And we drove through an area that you could see that was made primarily because there were cliffs on Omaha Beach. And what they had, they cleared a space there so you could drive up. And we drove until we got to a town called St. Lo. And they asked us to prepare our gun to use in case we were needed. Well, it was raining like hell that night. You'd dig a foxhole, and it would fill with water. So I wound up sleeping under the truck, trying to keep out of the water. And that was the first experience we had with the German planes, observation planes, dropping flares so they could see what was going on the ground. And not having been exposed to that before, we were sure they could see the whites of our eyes from, well, I don't think it was that clear. But anyway, that scared the daylights out of us. And then we were exposed to artillery. We were close enough that we had to be aware that you could be hit with artillery. And one dropped about 10 yards from us. And because of the rain and everything, the ground was very soft. Well, the projectile went into the ground, and when it exploded, the mud and so forth had kept the shrapnel from going. Otherwise, we might have got hurt that time. Well, from then on, it was follow the order. In other words, if the whole army moved and wanted us for particular jobs, the worst job what we would get would be to guard the 105s. That's a smaller artillery and needed to be closest to the front lines. As soon as you stopped, you had to dig a hole for the gun. The gun came first. And we had done it so often, we knew what the perimeters were and the shape they had to dig. and dig a hole deep enough for this artillery piece to be protected. After that, then you got to dig a foxhole. And you share the foxhole with somebody else. In Germany, after we dig a hole, all the houses that were empty there, we would go to a house and take a door, and then when we dug our foxhole, we'd put the door over our foxhole and cover that, and if we were going to be there for any length of time, we'd camouflage it. We'd do it with the material that they had. Otherwise, we'd use sod that we would use. And it depending on how long you're going to be, you could sometimes be there a week, sometimes be there 2 days, sometimes an hour, 2 hours. So you were constantly, and that's the reason they had that load and unload, that routine. And that's the way we spent the entire war. And it was winter already. You learn how to live. You take a bath out of your helmet. It's very, very, you're 18 years old. You could adapt to anything. So that's basically what happened until the end of the war there. We were waiting out on Marseille. We were ready to be shipped to the South Pacific. Well, then Harry dropped a bomb, which was like, we don't have to go. And to me, he was the guy, he saved my life, I'm sure he did. We shipped out of Plymouth, England. So we must have gone back to England. Now that's foggy in my mind now, how we got out of there. All I know, it was in December, and it was in the North Atlantic, the most horrible weather you could ever imagine. It took us 21 days to cross the Atlantic Ocean. That's how bad it was. The ship, when a wave hit and you were on top of the thing, or on the bottom, I should say, you had to look up like it was a high rise to the top of that wave. And when the boat got up there, it was enough for the ship, the screw, to come out of the water, and then there was no resistance, and the whole ship would shake like this. And then it was so bad that when we were eating on a ship, first of all, on the ship they put us 3 high. It was like one bunk, second bunk, and then a third bunk. And in the same area was where they were feeding us. So you can imagine, was food flying all over the place. And 21 days, I didn't get sick. I made up my mind I'm not going to get sick, and I stayed out on the deck almost all the time, had my coat on. I watched the movie Saratoga Trunk 4 times. I thought I could know the dialogue. And that's what happened. We landed in Norfolk, and when we landed, they couldn't land anymore. The water was so rough they couldn't land a ship. And I got home, and luckily I got home by Christmas.